Alright, here's the MIDI. This is my jam. Yo guys, what's going on? Thanks for coming back to another episode of EV Music, where we explore how technology and music come together to create awesomeness. So a lot of you guys have been leaving comments and feedback on my videos recently, which I really appreciate, and there's some questions we just gotta get to. And one of the questions I've seen asked the most is how can we play MIDI files on the iPhone? So today we're gonna be making an app that does just that. So stay tuned and enjoy the rest of the video. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have the latest version of all the tools we need to make this app. That's the number one thing you should do to avoid some common errors. So first of all, we're going to go to audiokit.io/downloads. For those of you who don't know AudioKit, it's an awesome tool that you can use to build audio apps on iOS, and it's open source too, so that means you can look at all the code that's used to make it, so recommend checking it out. We're going to be using it for this video. So what you want to do is download the latest AudioKit package, so we're going to go ahead and do that. You want to click on the one that says iOS. You're also going to go to the GitHub, and I'll link these in the description below so you guys can check them out. But yeah, we're going to download the GitHub as well for the starting project, which the starting project is going to be from a previous video I made, which if you want to know how to make the foundation of what we're going to make, you should check out that video. I believe it was my last video, actually. Very long time ago, it seems like. I know, I'm just starting to make videos because why not? Want to get back into it. So yeah, you're going to download it. I believe it is Urban Pan, Urban Smash. You're going to want to download that and download the release, download the zip. And I'm gonna bring you guys through this on how to update everything, because this project that we made has all the old stuff in it. We want some new stuff in it, so we gotta import that. So while we're waiting for this to download, I just thought I'd talk about my new style of videos. So this video is just gonna be we're just gonna be doing straight coding. I'm not gonna explain a lot because there's a lot of underworkings to this AudioKit stuff and how it actually reads MIDI files. And for those of you who don't even know what MIDI files are, let's just go ahead and look something up. So MIDI is a protocol designed for recording and playing back music on digital synthesizers that is supported by many makes of personal computer sound cards. Originally intended to control one keyboard from another, it was quickly adopted for the personal computer. So like it says, MIDI is a protocol. That's the key word right there. Because a protocol is actually, there's a lot of internet protocols. Like if you look in your web browser and you see like HTTPS, right? HTTPS is, I believe, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. So that's why you see HTTP and HTTPS, because the difference is one is secure, and that's what most websites use today. So MIDI itself is actually a protocol, which means that you can actually transfer MIDI over the internet, which is something that's interesting, because I could be playing a keyboard on my phone that's connected to my keyboard at home through MIDI, and the connection would be through the internet. Kind of curious about that, but that's for a different video maybe. But anyway, looks like our project has downloaded, so let's go ahead and open that up. And then we'll also open up the AudioKit iOS. That will open up nicely as well. And then we're gonna go ahead and, if you don't already have Xcode, you wanna make sure you grab the latest version of that from the Mac App Store. Make sure you have the latest version too, so if you haven't updated, go ahead and do that right now. Then we're going to go ahead and open the project. And we need to get rid of these AudioKit UI frameworks, or the AudioKit frameworks right there. We need to get rid of those because those are the old ones, and it will give us an error if we try to load those. And then go to AudioKit iOS drag those back in, drag them under frameworks. I think they have to be in the frameworks folder possibly. Let's double check, are they in here? Yep. Okay, this is a kind of important thing to do to make sure that we can build our project. All right, let's try and build it now and see if it fixed it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it looks like they have to be in the frameworks folder, so make sure you drop them in there. Okay, so what we want to do is, like the purpose of this video, we want to load a musical instrument digital interface, MIDI. We want to load a MIDI file, which a MIDI file you can think of as a sequence of MIDI notes. So we're going to go ahead and download this one. I'll leave it in the description. Most music software, you'll be able to open up a MIDI file, so we're just going to use Finale to open it up and see what we have. So I actually got Finale through my school, so that's what I'm using right now. You can also use MuseScore too, which is free. So yeah, let's go ahead and open it up. Playback controls, that's what we use. So you can see right there, MIDI file is essentially a sequence of notes just in a file. And what this file actually contains at the lower level, we'll get into in the next video. But all you need to know is that it contains all the notes that we need to play that file. So we can go ahead. One thing to note here, this says track 4. So this will be, I believe, the third element in our, and we'll get to that later. That's just important to keep in mind, is that it's that track number. So our app is loaded there, and if you recall from the last video, it can play notes. So pretty cool stuff. But what we want it to do is be able to play our MIDI file that we just downloaded. So let's go ahead and write the necessary code to do that. So we're gonna go back to Xcode, and there's just a couple objects we're gonna use to do this. I recommend checking out the AudioKit Documentation, it's very useful. So some of the objects we're gonna be using are the AK Apple sequencer. We're gonna be using this object to load our MIDI file. And then we're gonna be using the AK MIDI node, which is going to be the connector that connects our MIDI file object to our sampler, which, if you recall from the last video, again, recommend checking that out. We have our AK sampler, which is actually the instrument that plays our sound. So we need to connect that through some sort of medium, and that's what this AK MIDI node does. And yeah, those are the main two objects we're going to be working with, so let's just go ahead and get started. So up here, we're gonna create a couple new objects, as I said, just kind of declare them. We're not initializing them yet, but we'll do that further down in the code. So we're gonna do var MIDI file. It's gonna be our MIDI file. And we need to actually import our MIDI file, so let's go ahead and do that. So it's this Caribbean mid, and then put it right there. You can put it anywhere. I'm gonna put it under, like, I don't want it to be in samples, so just make sure it's in the main directory. And then it's gonna be AK Apple sequencer. Once Xcode will, there we go. Wanna make sure that it exists still. And like I said, that's gonna be the object we use to load our MIDI file. And then the connector that's going to connect our MIDI file to our sampler is going to be the AK MIDI node. So let's go ahead and put that in there. And now we're just going to initialize all of that stuff. So first we need to load our MIDI file, and we're going to do that under this init. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to do it after we initialize that sampler right there. So we're going to do MIDI file equals, and how you initialize stuff in AudioKit is you just say the type name again, and now we look at, okay, what do we need to do to initialize these parameters? So we're gonna go AK Apple sequencer, and it looks like when we're initializing it and we want to load it with a MIDI file, we need that URL. So we're going to go ahead and load that URL from URL. And I recommend doing the URL instead of the string, because that's kind of what I know how to do. So, I mean, do whatever you want to do, but just if you want to follow on in this video, I recommend using that. So we're going to do bundle.main.url for resource, and that's going to look in this main directory here. So our resource name is going to be the file name, which is Caribbean, without an extension, and then that extension is mid, so .mid, but you don't type the dot in there, just the, leave the dot out. And then this is going to tell us that we need to do what's called force unwrap. I don't recommend doing this usually. What I would recommend doing is having some sort of way to handle if that file didn't exist, because otherwise, if it doesn't exist, then your program's basically going to crash. But we know for sure this exists right here, and we'll build it, and it should even work. But normally I wouldn't do that, so I'll show you how to do that in the next video. And then once we load our MIDI file, I just kind of want to see how many tracks do we have. So we can do that by accessing a property here, which is called MIDI file.track count. So that's a property of this object we defined up here, our AK Apple sequencer. That's a property of that. So we can go ahead and check and see how many MIDI tracks do we have in this file. And like we saw in Finale, if it's still open, no it's not, I think I closed it. Well, like we saw in Finale, we had all those tracks laid out. So you can go back and look at that part of the video, but it should have those amount of tracks. So let's go ahead and see how many tracks do we have, just to be sure. This might take a while to load. So there you saw, you just got a little blip of it. And take note, it's not playing any MIDI file right now because we haven't connected it to our sampler yet. But let's see, MIDI tracks. So we can see here we have 9 tracks, and that's a key thing, because we want to play one of those tracks, which sounds like the steel pan instrument to me, and that's that main kind of sound. I'll play it again. So you can probably hear the main melody in that. That's the track that we want to load. Everything else we can just ditch that. So how we're going to do that is we have our MIDI file, and then we actually have a property that's an array. Now if you don't know what an array is, it's a kind of basically a block in the computer's memory that can hold multiple objects. So in this case, we're holding multiple tracks. So we want to access that array. And to do that, we need to index it. So that's how we do that, index. And track 0, we know we don't want that, because if I remember correctly, it was that track, track 4 it said. So take note that arrays actually index at 0 instead of 1. So we'll type 0. And to clear this track, we know we don't want this one. So we're just going to do clear. And as you can see here, just so you can double check, clear all events from this track. So that will clear all of the MIDI note data. So we're going to go ahead and run that clear. And we're just going to do this for all of the tracks except track 4. So that's going to be, if we do this, see 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's track 4 actually. So that one, we don't want to include that. So we're gonna comment that out. And then I'm just gonna do this for the rest of these tracks. Do track 1, or no, that's actually track 2. And then track 2, track 3, we don't wanna do that, which is actually track 4. Again, the indexing throws me off all the time too, so don't let it trip you up. And remember, we have 9 tracks, but we're actually gonna stop at 8 because that's our index that we're following if we start at 0. So go ahead, stop right there. And we're still not done yet to be able to hear sound, be able to hear our file play. So what we have to do now is we need to connect our file to our sampler. So how we're going to do that? We're going to initialize our MIDI file connector that we declared up above, and AK MIDI node. And how do we do that? How do we initialize that? Well, let's go back to the documentation here and look at this. So it looks like what it actually does is it will take a AK polyphonic node, which if we look at the AK sampler here, there it is. Okay, so we can see the AK sampler is also an AK polyphonic node. So it seems like they're related, right? So how we initialize that then, since this AK sampler is of type AK polyphonic node, then what we can do is, if we go back here, I just want to make sure that you guys understand this. It can be a little bit tricky at first. But if we see here, our initialize function, this parameter, it's by default set to nil, which means nothing. So we can have that, we can scratch that. We don't need that. We don't need it to have a name for our application. But we do need this node right here. That's critical. So our node, since we can tell that this sampler, the AK sampler that we created in the last video, that inherits from AK polyphonic node. So we know that it's going to be compatible with this. So we can go ahead and, I lost it, there we go. We can go ahead, our node is going to be our sampler. And then still not done yet. Don't get too excited, but we literally have to write one more line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to choose to do this after AudioKit starts because I think it will actually throw an error at you if you try to start the sequencer before AudioKit starts. So make sure you do it after this. And then all we do to start the sequencer is we just do our sequencer name and then play. So MIDI file.play. And there we have it. Now we should hear our MIDI file being played. So interesting. I think we need one more object here that we're missing. Yeah. So we're missing something here. We need to do something with our MIDI file connector. If you remember, we defined that up here because we don't want it to be that sine wave, although that is kind of nice. I like that sound. We don't want it to be that. So right up here, after we initialize our MIDI file connector, we're gonna do right here, we're gonna do MIDI file dot set global MIDI output. So this is where we're actually transferring the MIDI data from that MIDI sequence, our AK sequence. So this is where we're transferring that data to our MIDI file connector that's going to connect to our sampler node. So we're going to go ahead and set that to our MIDI file connector .MIDI in. And you can again take a look at that. Our MIDI file connector of type AK MIDI node has a property called MIDI in, which is interesting because this really shows, and again, we'll get into this in the next video, this really shows where AudioKit is really built on top of Apple's core MIDI. And if you don't know core MIDI, that's what Apple uses to handle MIDI data. It's a framework that we can use to accept MIDI messages to the iPhone. So we can see here, MIDI endpoint ref is a core MIDI type. So really important that you understand that this is built on top of a bunch of different frameworks that are handling all this MIDI data. So that's a property that we can use to get that MIDI endpoint ref. And now if we set this, everything should be connected, so we can go ahead and see what happens. Hey! So this is pretty awesome. We got our MIDI file playing, but it kind of feels like there's just something missing there, right? We want to see the buttons that are being pressed when our MIDI file is actually being played on the Steel Pan app. And to be able to do that, we actually need to modify one of the AudioKit classes. So the one we're going to be modifying is our AK sampler, because there's a lot of stuff going on under the hood here, but what you need to know is you'll find that out in the next video. I'll try to show you. But what you need to know is that all of this stuff we just connected goes all the way back to our AK sampler object that we created in the last video. So all the MIDI data is actually being sent to that object. So we want to modify what happens when that object is being played, because although we don't see anything happening on the screen, it's still playing the sampler. It's just that the buttons aren't being pressed, or we can't see that anything is being pressed. So in our AK sampler object, you'll see this is the AudioKit GitHub, by the way. I recommend checking it out because you can see all the stuff that goes on. This is why open source is awesome, because you can just take a peek. But yeah, we can see here that a lot of stuff is going on this play function right here. We're actually playing the note that we received, the MIDI note data. So that's very important that we know what that does. But we'll get to that in the next video. For now, you just need to know that all of this data is being sent to that sampler. So we just need to make some custom functions that will be able to automate some button presses. So first of all, we're gonna get our buttons all set up, ready to do this. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make the buttons show touches when they're highlighted. And when they're highlighted, that's a property we can change. So that's what we're gonna do through all this automation that we're doing. So let's go ahead and do that. We're just gonna load the main storyboard. Oh, by the way, also, if you guys try to build this on any other iPhone than the iPhone 8, just to let you know, the screen size isn't set up for those, unfortunately, but hopefully you can figure out how to do that. Otherwise, I'll make another video on how to do it, but I have it set up for my iPhone right now. So if you do it, it will just be like white space, which doesn't look as cool. Sorry about that, but me and Urban Smash Tony, we're going to work on getting the constraints. Hopefully, he told me he was actually working on that. So this is an awesome idea that he came up with, and really the only thing I've done is just gotten AudioKit to work with it, but he put all these buttons in here and stuff, and it's really amazing what he's doing. So go check his stuff out. Go check his Steel Pan stuff out. He does a lot of cool stuff with that. So anyway, let's go ahead and change these. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of our buttons and just go ahead and select each individual button. Right now what I'm doing to select multiple buttons, I'm just holding down Shift, so that way I can click on multiple ones. So we're just going to go ahead and do that for all of the buttons. And it looks like we got everything selected. So now what we're going to do is you're going to make sure you have this Show Attributes Inspector. Going to go to the Attributes Inspector, and then you'll see somewhere down here, Shows Touch on Highlight. You want to check that box right there. And now we can just make sure Shows Touch on Highlight, click on another one, Shows Touch on Highlight. So that's what we want right there. And now all we'll do is we'll build that again just to see what that does. take note, we're not gonna see anything being played unless we press the button, right? But that's what we're getting to. So you can see it actually shows it right there. All right, let's turn that off. So you can see a little bit of a difference there, that it actually shows where we touch. And that's exactly what we want, because we can actually control that property that the button is highlighted. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So what we're gonna do first is kind of annoying. Sorry that you guys have to go through this. And by the way, if there's any people out there smarter than me and you're just like, what is this guy doing? There's probably a better way to do this, but let me know in the comments below if you do have a better way. But the way I'm doing it right now, it works, although it's not the best. So let me know if you guys have a better way. I'd be happy to hear, what can I do? Because I'm not a computer scientist, really. I'm a music technology, but I do programming on the side. So yeah, I don't know as much computer stuff as I should, but hey, it's whatever. But anyway, so what we're gonna do is, from the last video, we remember that each of these buttons has a number or a tag assigned to it, and that's actually the MIDI note number as well. So it's very important that we were able to get that MIDI note data and be able to control each of these buttons because it has that number. So to do that, we need to create references to all of these buttons in our code, actually. Kind of annoying. But actually, before we do that, we're going to create an array where we can store those buttons. And how we do that, I just looked up how do we create a UI button array, and I found this good initialization right here. So we can just go ahead and copy that into our code. And we're going to make this a global array. So what global means is we can access it in other files. So you want to make sure it's not under any class. Just put it at the top of this file. And we're going to call this button array. And it's an array of UI buttons. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to initialize that array later with all of our buttons, so that way we have something to access all of those buttons through. And again, this is the annoying part, but we got to create all of our references to the buttons, yeah. So this is button 56. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to control hold, then click, and then insert action. You want to make sure it's strong, and then button 56 is what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to do this for all of the buttons. So fast forward time. Alrighty, so we got all of our buttons connected to the outlets. So now what we're going to do is initialize that array. So how we do that is we're actually not going to include self, because this isn't part of this class, so we don't need to do that. This array, remember, it's a global array, so it doesn't have a class that it's part of, really. So we do button array equals, and then we would do the array. So we're going to do those brackets, square brackets, and then here, these are part of this class, so we can do self.button 53. Okay, yeah, so this is important to note, is that the range of our steel pan goes from MIDI note 53 to MIDI note, I believe it is somewhere around here, 84. There it is. So that's the range of our steel pan instrument, so we're only going to be using those buttons. So go ahead and put all of the buttons in here, and we'll fast forward the video again. Alrighty, so we have copied all of the buttons into our array, and now what we need to do is we need to extend that AudioKit class. So we're going to go to our AudioKit sampler here, and remember, this is the class we want to extend. So actually, some of you who've done Swift programming, you might notice the extension keyword. We're not going to be using that. We're just going to make our own custom class that extends this AudioKit class. So we're going to call this class what am I going to call it? MIDI file in, where is it? Oh, whoops. We're in the wrong file. Sorry about that. We want to make this in our conductor file. So we're going to retype that. Class MIDI file instrument and then AK sampler. Okay, so right up here we have a function that's called play, I believe. I'm looking for it. Yeah, so here we have sampler.play. So you notice play is a method of our AK sampler object right there, sampler. Play is a method we can use, and therefore we can override. So going back to what we said earlier, it's important that you understand that all of these objects that we set up to connect to our AK sampler, this MIDI file connector and this MIDI file object, they send MIDI messages to that sampler, and that is what activates that play method. So we just want to override that to be able to press our buttons or give them the sense that the impression that they're being pressed, or the I don't know what the word is for it, the illusion. They're not actually being pressed, but we want to give the illusion that they are. So how we do that is we're going to override that play function. So we do override func and play, just like that. And the reason we want to do this is because we want to add our own customization to this play function. And it's very important that we call the function from the superclass first, because we want to still, do all the stuff that our superclass does, that the regular sampler does, but we also want to add our customization. And again, watching my previous video will help with this a bunch, so make sure to do that. Okay, so once we call this super method, then we want to do something later, which we'll get to that. All right, then we're gonna do override func and then stop. And yep, there we go, super.stop. And again, here's something to check out. This note number right here is of type MIDI note number, and then this velocity is of type MIDI velocity. These right here are variable names. You can use them like variable names. So when we call super.play, we just use that variable name in place of that, if that makes any sense. It will take time, so just let it absorb into your brain. And there's plenty of other tutorials out there that will describe this, but we'll definitely go into more depth in the next video that I make, so stay tuned for that one. All right, so now we're going to write our automation functions that will automate the button state. So we're going to do func automate button press, and this function doesn't exist yet. We're just going to write our own. And then our function is going to take in a parameter called a button number, and this is going to be of type int. Okay, and then what this function is going to do is it's going to say let pan range. So this is a variable this is a property that we're declaring, and remember, this is the note range of our instrument, so it might go from middle C to whatever. This is that note range, so we want to make sure that all the notes coming in that we're going to display are in that note range. Just like marimbas and any instrument you're used to has its note range. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so then, this is very important, we're going to do a dispatch queue.main.async block. What this is going to do is whatever code we have in this block, it's going to run on the main thread, and it's going to run asynchronously. So what that's important is, normally code runs sequentially, and it runs in series, and that's great, but that means we have to wait for the previous line of code to complete running before we run the next one. And that's not good with MIDI, because MIDI, things are happening simultaneously, not at the same time. You're having multiple notes being played, so you don't want that. So that's why we're going to do this dispatch queue.main audio.async. And we're going to write our code inside of there, just to be safe, because you always want to be safe when audio programming. So make sure you do that. And then we're going to do something here to check if our button number coming in our note range, our pan range. So we're going to do if pan range contains our button number, then execute the following code, which we're going to access our button array now. Remember this button array that we created a long time ago? We're going to access that now, and that's why it's important that it's global so we can access it in any class. So we're going to do button array. And here's how we're going to convert the numbers, because you may be thinking, oh, well, how are you going to convert the note numbers? Well, we know that the lowest note in our button is 53, right? So all we have to do is subtract the integer coming in by 53. So we do int button number minus 53. No, not negative 53, just minus. And then dot is highlighted. Remember that property? It's in the main storyboard. So if we go back to the attribute inspector, you'll notice shows touch on highlight. Well, that is highlighted state is actually a property. So we can access that, and we want our button to be highlighted whenever that note comes in. So we're going to set it to true. All right, and that's our code for that. We can basically copy and paste this whole thing for the button release. We're just going to call this automate button release. And the only difference here is we're going to set this to false because we want our button to go back to its regular state when it's not being pressed. Okay? And now we're in the final stretch. All we're going to do is on our note play, we're going to write a new line of code. It's going to be our automate button press. And we're going to take in an integer of our note number. Now it's very important that you cast it to an integer just like I did there. Because right now it's coming in as a MIDI note number, and we want to convert that back to an integer. So that's how we do it right there. And then, whoops, that was the release. We want actually the automate button press. Oh, whoops. Yeah, sometimes it does that. Okay. So there we go. We got our automate button press, and then we do automate button release, and then int and our note number. All right, so sweet. We got all of our code done. Let's go ahead and check this out, see what it does. Oh, okay. So my heart just immediately slipped, and I was like, no, what do we do? We haven't used our class yet, so we need to change this. So the cool thing is, since this inherits from our AK sampler, it's basically the same, right? It's just that we added some customization to it. So we can, instead of our AK sampler up here, where we declare our sampler, we're going to do MIDI file instrument or whatever we called it, right? And then also we need to change the initialization right down there, okay? And that's going to allow us to use our custom class that we just set up right here, okay? So hopefully it will work this time. Hey, it works. That's amazing. I love it. And the cool thing about this, guys, is you can load a lot of different MIDI files. So I really love this website, BitMIDI. They got all the MIDI files. One I've been enjoying is they even got the Wii channel. Let's try that one out just for fun. I kind of want to see what it's like. So we'll download this. This is going to be tricky because I don't know what track it's on. I think it's on 1. We'll just try that. We'll just, let's go ahead, put that in the project. Yeah, MIDI files are pretty cool, guys, if you're new to the world of MIDI. It's awesome. It's powerful. you can play a lot of notes. So yeah, let's go conductor, and then we'll change this to we. And then I'm gonna, actually another cool trick you can do that I should show you guys is, we're not gonna clear all these anymore. We're gonna just let them be. So it plays sine waves instead if it doesn't have an instrument. But yeah, let's say, so this is my global MIDI input or global MIDI output. So what that means is all of the MIDI tracks are going to be playing to that output. What I want is I just want one track to play to that output or to my sampler, and the rest will just be sine waves when they don't have an instrument that they're connected to. Remember how we forgot to connect this and it was playing sine waves? Yeah, that's what AudioKit defaults to when you don't have it connected to a AK polyphonic node. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set this output to our sampler for just track 1. So we would do tracks and then 1 in set MIDI output, and then our endpoint again, which is MIDI file connector.MIDI in. And once we do this, it should play the Wii song, which is awesome. I love the Wii song. Oh, whoops. I cleared that. Shoot. Okay, let's try it again. Hey. Boom, 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 boom. Such a classic. That's kind of interesting though. I wonder would like 4 people have to play that or something crazy like that? Because you can't play all those notes. Or somebody challenge me. Somebody make a video and just. I like to see this actually. It's kind of cool how you can just see the layout of it. It's got such a nice melody too. But anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.